It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Guiguitte Howitt. Your maiden name is Zilberman. You were born near the end of the Shoah in 44. Yeah. And Guiguitte, you are really such an amazing person that you came to Israel. You've dedicated many of your years volunteering as a tour guide and now as a volunteer at Yad Vashem for over 15 years. And we are fascinated to hear about what a family you came from, the history of your family.
Fine. Both my parents were born in Poland, both from big Hasidic families, but they came to Belgium as babies. My mother was about 2 years old, my father 4 years old, so they really didn't remember very much about Poland. Why they came to Belgium, I never found out. I have no idea. They grew up in Belgium, and they got married in 1941. The Germans were over there. Yes, that's the picture. That's a picture of my parents' wedding. They were married by Rav Rottenberg. That was the last wedding he made in Antwerp before he ran away. After my parents got married, about a week or so later, the Germans were already in Belgium, but there were no talk about deportations. The Jews were not allowed to go out of the house after 7 o'clock. They were not allowed to go on public transport. There were everyday new rules. So their parents advised them to go away because there were rumors that young people were taken to labor camps. So they left and they ended up in France, leaving their parents behind because nobody thought they would take older people. Certainly not to labor camps, and of course nobody spoke about concentration camps.
They didn't know.
Nobody knew, and it wasn't. There was no talk about it. In the meantime, my grandparents from my father's side were taken in by non-Jewish people called Robson. They took them with a daughter, Charlotte, and another young girl called Ida Wasserman, and hid them till the end of the war in Antwerp. My grandparents, from my mother's side, they stayed in Antwerp, and unfortunately in 1942 they were taken by the Germans first to a place called Mechelen. Mechelen was the transit camp in Belgium, and from there to Auschwitz, and that was the end of that. Then
they were murdered. They were murdered.
Both of them were murdered. They were called Horowitz, Meshulam and Hadassah Horowitz. My parents, in the meantime, stayed in France. What exactly, how they lived and what, I've never found out. I know they went with false papers. They had different names, different identities, and they survived the war. They tried to get into Switzerland, into England, and into Spain, and everywhere they were turned back.
Did they know about their parents being transported to Auschwitz?
They had absolutely no idea what happened to the parents. There was no communication, nothing. So much so that in September 1944, the Germans left Belgium. And that's why my parents went back to Belgium. Everybody went back to where they came from to try and find family. And my grandfather, from my father's side, was very lucky to get a house back in Antwerp. The problem was, even that the Germans weren't there, they were still bombing Antwerp. Why? Because Antwerp has a very important port called the Schelde. And because the boats were arriving to Antwerp, they were dropping bombs. There were no Germans in the street, nothing anymore. And my mother was pregnant with me, and one day a bomb fell across the road on the bridge, and she said, I cannot stay here. It's too dangerous and it's too scary. So she moved to Brussels, and that's why I was born in Brussels, in a place called Etterbeek, because of the bombing.
And what date were you born?
I was born 28th of December 1944.
So this is really still, the war still...
Yeah, the war went on. Not only that, particularly in Hungary, that is when most Jews were killed. Even though that the Germans knew that they lost the war, they were determined not to lose the war against the Jews. And instead of using the trains to bring back wounded soldiers, they used them to transport Jews to Auschwitz and killed them straight away. It was one of the biggest murders. There could have been 500,000 Hungarian Jews were killed within a few weeks, and that was Eichmann's doing. In any case, when I was born, my parents had no idea. My father knew that his parents came out, of course, of hiding, but my mother had no idea what happened, and I'm certainly not named after her mother because she didn't know she was alive or not. They didn't know what happened. Not only that, my sister Miriam, who was born a year later, still hasn't got a name. It's only in 1949 that my mother realized that her parents were not coming back. So we lived in Antwerp.
The family that hid your grandparents,
Yes.
were they recognized as righteous
Yes,
Gentiles?
Definitely. There is a plaque in Yad Vashem.
And have you still
Yes.
continued the
Not me,
communication?
my brother has contact with the descendants.
Have you
They're
met-
not
have you-
alive
have you
anymore.
met the descendants?
Yes, not the descendants. I remember meeting the parents, yes, after the war. In our community in Antwerp, everyone was a survivor. Otherwise, they wouldn't be alive. Most people who left Antwerp before the war for one reason or another, either they ran away or they were murdered. People didn't come back to Antwerp, very, very few. Some people moved to Israel, America, whatever. Very, very few of the original Antwerp people came back to Antwerp. So we had a lot of people came from the camps, from particularly Hungary, Poland, whatever. From the DP camps, they came to Antwerp. And I just remember going in the street as a child, and if you saw another Jewish person, you would say, which camp were you in? Did you see my mother? Did you see my brother? Nobody knew what had happened to people. Slowly, slowly stories came out, but really nobody knew what had happened. I went to a Jewish school called the Yesodeh Torah. Not one girl in our school had a grandparent. It just did not exist. Nobody had it. We had no family. Our closest family were the Horowitzes that you met, and they were distant cousins. Nobody had family. It just didn't exist. I still had one aunt in London because she married from Antwerp in 1932, so she moved to London. And my father had a brother in New York who left Belgium in 1939, managed to get out, and he lived in New York. But otherwise, nobody had family.
Can I ask, how did this picture of your parents' wedding survive?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe her sister had it in London. I have no idea. I simply don't know. There are a lot of things I don't know. I must say that a lot of survivors didn't talk about what happened, but not only that, the youngsters didn't want to hear it. We did not want to hear the stories. I used to get very, very angry whenever they spoke about the war. I said, stop talking about it. I would go into a shop, I say, oh, the man is nice, non-Jewish people. And my father would say, oh, yes, sure, very nice, but we don't know what he did in the war, do we? And it was everything, the war, and we did not want to hear those stories. Now I wish I had, because there are lots of questions I could ask. For instance, I know that my father joined the partisans in France. I have no idea under what name, whatever. I don't even know what they lived on. I only know that my mother once told me that they never ate non-kosher food. Never. Through the whole war. But that's all I know, basically.
And the people that helped them in France, you don't...
I don't think they knew they were Jewish. We once went back, my parents took us to a place called Le Puy, that's a small place in France, and we met people who they knew during the war, but they didn't know they were Jews, they didn't know what Jews were. They were ordinary, nice, simple people, mostly people who worked as peasants or whatever. They had no idea what Jews were. So they were lucky to survive, and the whole community in Antwerp, I came back, after the war they came back, lived very, very well. People wanted, because they'd lost all their youth and their families and everything, to catch up. And we lived on a very, very high standard. And we loved going on holidays, 2 months at the seaside in the summer, 2 weeks Switzerland skiing in the winter. And it wasn't just us, it was most of our friends around us. It was a very warm community, very frum, a lot of them. No Talmidei Chachomim, because nobody had a chance to learn, but they gave a chance to their children afterwards.
Were there any survivors that came back to Antwerp that lost their faith and they weren't from?
There must have been, but I wouldn't know them, because we lived within our own community.
And the majority
I was a madricha in the Benot Agudat Yisrael. I went to the Soda Torah. These were my friends.
But most of the families were very
and they
religious.
They were all very frum people.
They kept the emunah after the Shoah.
Yes, I know that my mum always said, the way my parents lived, I want to live. And we did. We had a very nice Hasidic homes. I have 3 sisters, a brother, and thank God, everybody is religious. Everyone in my family is religious. But we were particularly lucky to be able to get back the house that my father grew up in. My grandfather bought in 1920 after he came to Antwerp. And my father grew up in that house. And we did, and now my brother lives there in the same house.
I've been past.
Yes, I still got my room with my furniture that my father bought when I was a little girl. And it feels really like home. It's a very nice, very warm community.
I felt that as well.
Yeah.
Guiguitte, you mentioned something absolutely amazing, that after the war, your father retrieved heirlooms that he
My
had.
mother remembered after the war that her parents had left with some non-Jewish people, like a menorah, a Megillah, and a bit of jewelry, and my father managed to get it out. He paid them, of course, but he got quite a few things out.
And these non-Jewish
yeah, but it probably was of no interest to them.
But they gave it back.
They gave, from what I'm aware of, yes. There was a beautiful big candelabra, and that my mother gave to her sister, and because she had nothing as a souvenir of my parents, my grandparents, I mean, and really there was nothing left of them, nothing, you know. And what else can one say? Thank God we had a wonderful, wonderful childhood in Antwerp. And I'm extremely grateful to my parents. It was a lovely household, my parents. Big house, very noisy. We were allowed to have as many friends as we wanted, and it was always lovely.
And your grandparents, they were hidden by the non...
Yeah.
So you were basically the exception, that you did have a grandparent.
No, my grandfather died when I was 6. And his wife wasn't really my grandmother. Mm-hmm. My father lost his mother during the First World War. She was 27 years old. I'm named after her. What I didn't mention is that my father had 2 sisters, Ida and Sarah, 17 and 18, who were murdered. They refused to go into hiding. They said they were Belgian citizens and nobody was going to touch them. And they were taken to Auschwitz and murdered. I never knew them, of course, but yeah.
And Guiguitte, when you being so involved in the Shoah and having volunteered as a tour guide and a volunteer at Yad Vashem, was it very difficult for you to go back to Poland, to go to Auschwitz?
I went to Poland only once. I'm pleased I went. I certainly wouldn't go again.
But was it very traumatic?
Very much so.
Especially going to Auschwitz, where
I found the most difficult place was Majdanek, because Auschwitz looked like a museum. I could even see outside buses saying sightseeing Auschwitz. Majdanek was left the way the Germans left it. They had no chance of destroying, and I found the place very, very traumatic.
We felt the same. We felt actually the same.
Very, very
But
difficult.
it must have been a very emotional trip for you.
Definitely. Julian, my husband, wouldn't come with me.
Have any of your siblings gone back to Poland?
It's not going back. We were never there.
I know,
The
but
family is there. No,
to
but
visit.
my brother goes now. My brother is a real chassid, and he gets invited to go sometimes when there's a Yotzat of a Rebbe to tell stories, particularly tzans, and so he's a good storyteller, and he goes back occasionally. But we have even a grave of a great-grandfather of mine, who was known as the Pamnitzer Rebbe in Lodz. He died, he was nifter in 1939, so he still had a proper funeral. And
he's buried in the...
He's buried, yes, even my
Lodz.
grandsons went to the kever, yes. He was an important Rebbe there.
And when your grandchildren are, I know that
Yes.
they've gone to visit Poland. On
A few have with
and
school
are
and
you,
whatever.
what is your view on trips to
I think
Poland?
it's a very good idea they should go. I think it's a good idea they should learn. So far I haven't noticed a great interest as such. It's really history to them, like the Inquisition, nothing more. Nothing more. It's already too far, too distant for them in
And
history.
Guiguitte, this is a bit of a difficult question, but can I
Yeah.
ask, when you were at home,
Yeah.
both your parents having gone through what
Yeah.
they went through and their friends having gone through as well, was the Shoah a major part of their lives?
Yes.
Was it discussed
Yes.
nearly
They didn't
daily,
discuss
or-
it. They didn't discuss. They just mentioned it quite a lot. We had a very interesting incident in Antwerp once. I lived just near the diamond bourse. Most Jewish people worked in the diamond bourse, and there was a beautiful fruit shop there, greengrocer, very fancy, where on Friday all the Jewish people would go and buy the most beautiful baskets of fruit. And one day one of the ladies went in and she said, "That doesn't look nice." And the man turned round to her and said, "When you were in Auschwitz, you would have been happy to have this." And she left the shop screaming. She was so upset. We put that shop in Cherem, and after a month, he closed down.
Really?
Nobody would go in there anymore. He went to the Rav. He said she misunderstood. He didn't really mean it that way, but he had to close the shop.
Was it a Jewish?
No, they were non-Jewish shop, but he did extremely well out of the Jewish people. Because it was very fancy, and Friday people, like I said, people like buying beautiful things. And every summer, everybody went away for 2 months to the seaside, and we had all our friends there. And it was really a lovely way to grow up.
So it's amazing.
Wonderful school, Jewish school, where we learned in about 4 or 5 languages in the school. Yeah.
But it's amazing how your parents, having gone through what they did,
Yeah.
raised a family.
They did.
You don't want to use the word normal, but
Very much normal, and it was a very happy home. Very happy home, yeah. Yes.
And when did you, or what ignited your passion to know more about the Shoah?
It took me a long time. The first 20 years I lived in Beit Vegan, which is so close to Yad Vashem, I wouldn't go near the place. And one day I decided that was it. It's ridiculous, I should. And, well, now I'm part of it, yeah.
And Guiguitte,
Sure.
what message would you give to, first of all, to your grandchildren and to the future generations about
The first thing
Shoah?
is that, thank God we have Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael. I personally think that every Jew should live here. We've got the privilege of having it. Thank God we've got a wonderful army. And we hope and pray with God's help that that's where we are. That we can look after ourselves and never ever be in a position where we're completely helpless. Where people can take everything from you and ignore you and whatever. Yeah.
So Guiguitte, I just want to come here and say.
Yes, please.
Well, so my wife and I have known you and Julian since we came to Beit Vegan.
Yes.
It's 26 years.
Sure.
And I'm extremely grateful for the friendship and the closeness that we have.
Our
And,
pleasure, our privilege.
And it's been a great honor to hear you, a great honor and a privilege.
You're welcome.
And Guiguitte, if you could just show for our viewers the beautiful picture of your father.
Yeah.
How he...
This was my father. As I said, he was born in Kalisz, Poland. He lost his mother when he was 1.5 years and grew up in Antwerp.
Wow.
He was great fun to be with, a very full man. Said Tillum every single day, finished the whole of Tillum every day, but was a businessman.
Wow.
And thank God brought up a beautiful family.
And Guiguitte, just the last thing.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's astounding that the whole community remained religious after what they'd
Well,
seen?
I don't know,
and
there
what
must
they'd
be
lost?
people who
But
drop
the
things, but I
majority,
certainly
yeah.
didn't know them. It's become very, very Hasidish as well. Very Hasidish.
So it's
yes.
the rebirth. It's like the dry
Rebirth
bones.
is wonderful. We have all the Hasidish Stieblich in Antwerp, the Satman, Wisnitz and Gur, and you name it, it's all there. And schools and whatever you want. Very, very active, beautiful community.
And a lot of that community have actually come to Israel.
Well, I hope more will come. I hope more will come.
Anyway, thank you
Yes,
so very
you're
much.
welcome. You're welcome.